Oi, Brian! Yeah, could we have the Maker be a tech character, please? I want him to be an onslaught counter. Yeah, no, I know that he's technically just another version of Mr. Fantastic and should therefore probably maybe definitely be a science character, but I want him to be an onslaught counter. No, I know we could perfectly reasonably just swap these two characters around and have the Maker be a science character and the High Evolutionary, a champion who relies on futuristic technology, be a tech character. But Brian, I want him to be an onslaught counter. Brian, I want him to be a fucking onslaught counter. Look, this has been a really difficult video to make. There are just some scripts and some videos, for whatever reason, I just lose the ability to speak, and they're just quite difficult to wrap my head around. I end up needing to take notes, and it takes so many takes. I wanted to make this video yesterday, and I just couldn't. I just put the phone down, I put the laptop down, and I said no, and I walked away. But I'm here now. Now, before I get into the crux of this video, I need to make a few disclaimers. First disclaimer is, if at any point for the rest of 2025, I have to make another video talking about cellular disease, cellular cure, you have my permission to come to my house and just mercy kill me on sight. I am so done with this. Hopefully I can hit this one more time and never have to make another video about this ever again. But I won't hold my breath. Okay, the next disclaimer is, this is not me saying that the Maker is dead on arrival. He is going to be useful and powerful and ranked up by many people by virtue of his pre-fights alone. He's an updated version of Mr. Fantastic. We still use the Mr. Fantastic pre-fights to this day. I believe the Maker pre-fights will be used years into the future, right? They are very, very useful. They make a lot of champions more powerful, and that's cool. Now, you're also going to see throughout this video that if you get aggressive, if you really take the reins in a fight, he can produce some very decent numbers and some very good results. If you let the AI take over, however, and you play more passively, he's slow, he's frustrating, he's awkward, he's bad, right? But you need to get aggressive, and then he really does thrive. He's the sort of champion who really likes like high rank, high rarity. So you're seeing a 3-star here, a 7-star rank for Maker in its equivalent short form content will be a lot more impressive than what you're seeing here today. So keep that in mind. This is not me saying the Maker is dead on arrival. Furthermore, there are plenty of other champions that are part of the cellular disease, cellular cure philosophy that have not fallen ill to the criticism I'm going to outline in today's video. And that criticism is, cellular disease, cellular cure has wasted the Maker, in my opinion. I think we could have had twice the champion that we have, and he's a great champion, but I think we could have had twice the champion that we actually do have if Kabam were not following this philosophy. And I'm going to explain why. I have a script because I am a professional, and I'm going to read off of this, not really script, it's notes, but I'm going to read off of these notes because I'm a professional. I'm not even going to look at the recording anymore, right? Enjoy the video, but I'm not commentating. This is what you have. Okay. So, the design of defenders has obviously changed over the past 2 years, and you can kind of track these changes to the changes in the Battlegrounds point scoring system, right? If you're newer to the game, you don't know about this, the BG's point scoring system used to reward speed more than it does health. Now, you need to prioritize staying healthy, and more of your points come from staying healthy than it does from speed. However, when BG's was first released, it was a proper adrenaline fest, and if you finished a fight in 40 seconds, but at 60% health, maybe not that extreme, but you would do a lot better now compared to a guy who finished in 100 seconds, but at 100% health. Now, the second guy would certainly win. However, back then, it would have been closer. Right, so you can see how if you want to sell potent defenders, you need to make ones that synergize quite well with where you place emphasis on what's important in a fight. So now defenders are just straight up actively dangerous to your health bar if you do not take the correct RPG counters. Now, these RPG counters are rarely released before these tough defenders exist. So Captain Britain and the Maker, for example, Captain Britain comes first, she is the disease, and Maker is the cure, and he comes after. Now, of course, champions like Kushala were released before Serpent, Deathless Thanos was released before Zola. However, I believe if those were reverted, and Deathless Thanos came out after Zola, and Kushala came out after Serpent, I believe those two characters would have been very, very different to the ones we actually have. I think they would be tuned down a little bit to be more specific to those matchups. Now, this means that because the cures are released after the diseases, the cures have so much of their kit tuned towards that fight that they're wasted as champions. There's so much wasted potential. There are so many other things they could do, could be designed to do, and they're just not allowed to because these diseases are so cancerous that the entire of their kit needs to be tuned towards taking that fight in these short form PvP content like Battlegrounds, like Alliance War, that there are many, many other parts of the game that just are completely lost on the majority of these hard counters that are released today. For example, I'm not going to talk about the Maker, for the entire of this video. A good example of this is Spiral. So Spiral, a champion that we know very, very strong, known for tackling Serpent very, very well, with particular application at signature level 200s, taking certain hazard shift Serpents in Alliance War, but that's not the point. Now, she hits pretty hard, and I personally find her quite fun to play, and when she was announced on the Kabam livestream, Pinky and Perky certainly made a point of saying that she's not just a Serpent counter, which means that she's just a Serpent counter, because everything they say is scripted and almost certainly false. Now, if we want to claim that defenders like the Serpent are supposed to, quote, open up design space, it sure as hell looks to me like that's failing. She does one thing. Maybe Maestro, if your opponent, for whatever reason still runs Maestro and places him when you have a Spiral. But she does one thing. Design space has been closed to one champion because these defenders are just so ridiculous that their hard counters need to hit that kit so well just to neutralize it because there's so much shit going on that they're just very underwhelming everywhere else. Like, yeah, you can take Spiral into a bunch of other things, but her performance drops off a cliff compared to other champions outside of Serpent. So you're going to see in BGs, the odds of somebody using Spiral in a 2-hour sitting of Battlegrounds for any fight other than Serpent is zilch. Right? They use Spiral, they rank up Spiral for one thing. She's used for one thing. Now the Maker, while I think he's good, I feel and I worry that he's another example of this. So DLL replied to a comment underneath the Captain Britain deep dive with context video. If you haven't checked out his deep dive with context videos, right, please go look at them. I said this in my Captain Britain deep dive, right? They are the most detailed and informative videos. If you want to know anything about any champion, watch those videos. From a guy who does this for a living, he does not get as many views as he deserves. They're great videos. But anyway, he replied to a comment asking why we're getting so many defenders, and he said to open up design space so the champions and the offensive tech class can evolve. I have a feeling this is doing the opposite effect, because cancerous champions like Captain Britain and Onslaught in Battlegrounds are the focus of Kabam's profits. Specifically in Battlegrounds, but also in Alliance War, the cures to these champions need to have their offensive loops tuned towards these fights. Battlegrounds brain rot or not, like it or not, this is what he's designed to do. Onslaught, Captain Britain, Battlegrounds. That's it. End of. You can see this because his SB1, SB2 loop is certainly not the most game-breaking thing in the world. In fact, it's suspiciously well-tuned towards punching down with class advantage against those two champions. With that health pool, it's almost too neat. Go and look at, any content creator, I'm not on the CCP, but any content creator with access to the CCP taking the Maker through the Battlegrounds tester map against Captain Britain and Onslaught, you're going to see that SB1, SB2 cycle, it's pretty nice. However, if you take him elsewhere, you see that that's not really enough. And that SB3 loop that you'll see showcased against the boss in this footage, but also you saw it showcased against Thor Jane Foster, the first fight, it is better. It does go pretty hard. I find it quite fun. But it doesn't go much further than that. It does increase the damage output. It is a longer rotation designed for a longer fight. But by no means is he meant to tackle anything in Act 9, right? You're not going to be taking, like, Act 9.2 boss fights with the Maker. You're just not. Certainly not taking him into Everest content. And once that loop is done, you're done. You need to revamp. You need to go again, build up that damage again, and do the whole thing over again, right? There's no higher base damage to return to. You're back to basics. You're back to square one in terms of damage with the Maker after the loop. It's clearly targeted at these two champions, and I worry, just like Spiral, that he is going to fall ill to this cellar disease, cellar cure, and if he's not being used against his disease, his performance does this. Now, look, there is certainly a skill cap when you play the Maker. You're going to see that when we come up against the boss fight after we finish off this cable match, that the AI kind of mucks around. I don't play it optimally, and while this guy has been pretty impressive, he hasn't been incredible, but he hasn't been awful for the rest of these fights in this quest. You're going to see the time it takes him to get through that boss a lot higher the moment things slightly get out of hand and outside of his perfect matchup. Now, I could go all day on the wider effects of this change in design, but I'm going to focus on Battlegrounds because it really hammers home my point. If we want to argue, again, I'm saying it again, if we want to argue that tough defenders open up design space, look at Battlegrounds. You use one champion for one fight. You have X champions designed to take X diseases, and if you do not use these champions against these fights, you are either A, at a significant disadvantage, or you are dead. There is no in-between, right? That's it. You don't thrive. Oh yeah, I'm going to take Adam Warlock against Serpent, kind of a pseudo-counter. He's going to do really well. No, you're f***ed by a Spiral. That's it. I'm going to use Spiral against Arcade, kind of a fun fight. No, you're f***ed by a Vox. That's it, right? It's really sad to see. Now, I have an upcoming video. It's going to be a proper scripted piece. It's going to be another one of my serious productions where I talk about the perfect Battlegrounds deck. Now, as I'm going to design that to be an entertaining video, it's actually got quite a sinister subtext, which is there is such a thing as a perfect Battlegrounds deck. Right, that's quite a new concept. We have so many diseases in this game that require so many cures. You kind of end up with 30 champions that you need to have to survive in this competitive meta. And that's sad. That's why Cellar Disease, Cellar Cure sucks, because it wastes champions. The Maker feels cool. He looks cool. He's a cool champion. You know, if you're interested in the lore, as I get smacked in the face, if you're interested in the lore of these champions, you're interested in knowing their comic book history, read about the Maker. He's really, really cool. But he's wasted. And he could have been twice the champion that we have now. And unfortunately, he's just not. And that's because of Cellar Disease, Cellar Cure. Because these diseases like Captain Britain, like Onslaught exist, we need the Maker to neutralize those threats and do nothing else. And as my rant ends, it's not really a rant, I hope that doesn't count as a rant. I hope that counts as just a nice essay. However, as my, I guess, video essay ends, so does the quest. And we're going to cut to the Matty MCOC 3-star 5.1.6 leaderboard. And you can see this is shaping up quite nicely. You can see there, the Maker down there in 12th, 528 seconds. Now look, if that Archangel AI was slightly better, nothing stopping him from being right up there with like Gentle, Carolina Dean. He certainly hits hard. That's good. But he's a waste of a champion, in my opinion. In my opinion. Now, please let me know your thoughts on this in the comments below. I want to know. This is, after all, a community topic. This is something that's affected the community, not just me. So please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you have made it this far, then congratulations. You have an attention span greater than that of a goldfish. And, bye-bye.